Evening, we're going to wait just a little bit, half a minute or so, to allow everybody the opportunity to join the meeting from the waiting room. So momentarily we'll get going. Okay, I think probably most everybody is in. Again, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're delighted that you've joined us this evening for the first virtual artist talk from the Beverly Perdue Gallery at Bridgewater College. We're pleased to welcome Janley Jaggard, whose work is currently on display in our new gallery space. My name is Eric Niss, and I teach at the art department at Bridgewater College and the interim gallery director while Michael Huff is on sabbatical this semester. I just want to take a second and speak on behalf of, I'm sure, all of the art faculty and say that we are really excited and really pleased with the gallery space. And it's a definite upgrade from the gallery we had previously, and we're just really enjoying it. And it's really, really, really nice to see work presented in that space after waiting so long. So special thanks this evening to Janley and her flexibility in agreeing to do a virtual talk. I understand and know from experience it's pretty hard to talk about work while not present with it. So thanks to Janley for being willing to join us in this way and talk about her work with us. By way of introduction, Janley Jaggard lives and works in Stanton, Virginia. She was born and raised in Suffolk, England, and studied ceramics at the West England College of Art in Bristol. After finishing school, she was introduced to working with vitreous enamel by Elizabeth Terrell, and worked with her for several years. Janley moved to the US in 1994 and began teaching courses in drawing, painting, vitreous enamel, and hand-built ceramics at the Beverley Street Studio School in Stanton, Virginia. In 2014, she returned to England to pursue a master's degree in fine art at Norwich University of the Arts. Janley says that the fundamental core of her practice lies in the process of layering, paint over paint, or numerous coats of vitreous enamel. She is interested in how layering prompts opacity to interact with transparent surfaces, and how these interactions create a perceptual sense of down and through in the work. Her work is motivated by an interest in maps as a tool to decode space. Janley's paintings transition from concrete to abstract as she relies on intuition and experience to guide the work's development. We're very, very happy to have Janley with us this evening. And with that, I will turn it over to her for some comments. And we will have some images as she's talking also to give you some context for what she's saying.
Well, thank you, Eric. That was a wonderful introduction to me and my work. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for the beautiful space that Bridgewater College has provided for artists to put their work in. It truly is beautiful, and I felt very honored to see my work there. And on that note, I would quickly say that we often think of exhibitions being the thing that's done by artists to share their work. I would say another aspect of putting work into a gallery space is that it allows the artist to do a bit of serious review about their work, where they're going, where they've come from, where they need to go next, what is or isn't working when you have a body of work in a clean, beautiful, well-lit space. And that's what's just happened for me right there in your gallery. The work that's in the gallery has been accumulated over a period of probably a year, I would say. And it's probably goes over two or three different kinds of work. First and foremost would be the enamel work, which I'll talk about a little bit because of its unusual nature. Not many people see it or know it. And this might be a good moment to put a piece up, Eric. The first piece maybe. You've got two, there's 5 in the exhibition, but Eric's picked out a couple here that we're going to put up. So to talk about what vitreous enamel is, and please note I'm adding the word vitreous to the front there, because enamel in this country tends to mean a thick oil-like paint. In England, that's not the case. It means powdered glass fused onto metal. Ah, there's the view of the whole gallery. Doesn't it look fabulous? Such a beautiful space. Right down to that lovely yellow sofa in the middle. I just love it. So those overview of the gallery, which I hope some of you have managed to go and see if you're there at the college or by any other means. And on the wall that Eric's going to come to in a moment, here we are. This is one of 5 enamels that I have hanging in the space. So vitreous enamel is powdered glass that's sifted onto a metal surface. In this case, and most of my work, it's onto copper. So one of the things that an enamelist is trying to do is to celebrate the fact that the copper's there to start with and make it feel as though it's been subjected to heat. Powdered glass of many different colors, both opaque and transparent, is sifted on through various stencils and other methods onto the surface. And then each color is fused separately in layers for about 90 seconds at 1500 Fahrenheit. So this piece here, don't ask me how many layers, but it's probably somewhere around about 15 layers. So that's 15 firings. A firing for an enamel is only, as I say, 90 seconds maybe. So it's, if you're a ceramics person, don't think you're waiting weeks to get each color on. It's minutes. The only other thing about this piece that I would particularly say is that all of the white linear work on here is actually liquid enamel that's been painted on as the last layer. And this particular piece as an enamel relates strongly to my Australian interest, which is shown in some of my other paintings that we'll look at in a moment. There's a lot of inspiration that I gather from the Indigenous Australian work, which might be evident here. I don't know if you know anything about Australian Indigenous work, you may be able to recognize some of the characteristics. The other thing you might see from this piece is that whole idea that I'm dealing with and fascinated by of layering, one layer on top of another, an opaque over a transparent, or more particularly an enamel, a transparent over an enamel. The other thing to just quickly point out about enamel is that when you put it on and then put it in the kiln, you're literally, as anyone who works with heat knows, you're giving the work up. You don't have total control. It's not like you're holding a brush with a particular color paint on it and then waiting to see that it's doing exactly what you want it to do. So every time the work comes out of the kiln, something slightly different might appear. With experience and knowledge, you can control that, but never completely. So you're learning to go with what happens and how to respond to it. So it becomes a conversation. And on that point, I would say that idea, that practice has very much informed the way in which I paint. I think there's one more enamel there, isn't there, Eric, that you have to show? This one here. Yeah, this one here is a piece called Masked History. And I'm using the word mask there to refer to the system, that the conditions we're living in now, where we're all walking around wearing masks is a new idea, and connecting it to where were we before we had to wear them, and that kind of thing going on. In terms of technical pieces with this, technical information, the strip through the middle of this the gold kind of coppery color, you're actually looking at the copper there with a thin layer of flux on and over the copper. And that really pushes me to tell you that's why this exhibition is called A State of Flux, because it relates to the enamels, but it also relates to this whole situation we find ourselves in this year with COVID, of how everything's changing, everything's shifting, we're never sure of anything, and how or where we're going to be up to next. So I'm kind of reflecting on the situation we find ourselves in these days. From this piece of enamel, I don't know, Eric, do you have the painting that relates to this? I think you may have done. Not that one, but that one. This painting here is the same image basically, but here I've transferred it into a painting, which is in acrylic on canvas. And what I'm hoping, I'd like to think at least it comes through, is my strong inspiration from Australian Aboriginal work. I went to an exhibition at the Fraylin in Charlottesville, where it was an exhibition called Inside World, and it really fed my many years worth of interest in their work, because it was a beautiful exhibition that was hosted by the Kluge-Ruhe exhibition in Charlottesville, which is the largest collection of Aboriginal work in the world outside of Australia. This piece and others in this exhibition that you have there are direct references to work by the Indigenous Australians that are included in that exhibition, which is no longer there, but it was a beautiful exhibition. So here we are, I'm looking at images that are collected from the way in which I've been looking at their work, the kind of mark making they do, how they make this mark, what kind of materials they use. And this piece, as is often seen in my work, is a lot of dripping, putting paint on and then letting wet paint run through it, which works really well with acrylic, to create a very organic flow of drips, like you can see in the top of this piece here. So that's one of those things. And then if we go from this one to the painting you just had up there, Eric, this one, this is the second of a series from a result of going to that exhibition at the Fraylin Museum at UVA in Charlottesville. Any of you who know anything about Aboriginal art will know that this whole method of short marks that are cross-hatched over and over and over and over is absolutely typical of certain regional areas of Australian Aboriginal work, as are the colours. I'm very influenced by the coloration that they use. This painting, along with most of my work, has, I don't know, it goes on and on. Conversation back and forth, back and forth. Is it done? Is it done? Do I need to change that bit? Any artist will know and understand what I'm talking about in terms of, does the work, is the work finished? Finished meaning, is it now independent? Do I need to do anything else to it, or is it already able to hold its own? Hopefully, any of you looking at this will think that it does make a statement all of its own, and it doesn't require me to do a single thing to it as of now. This is a 24-inch by 24-inch piece on canvas. And I don't know if you have I don't think you have any more of those, do you, Eric? No, okay, so this piece here is slightly older than those, but it's definitely a connection through to the work that we've just been looking at. There's the mark making in terms of the transparency, the putting the paint on in layers, letting it drip off, be pulled off. I often manufacture a flow of water to run through the paint while it's just dry, and then I'll take paper towels and various materials like that to lift off that excess paint to get that wonderful sense of clarity that comes through the mist, as it were, that I find fascinating. This painting's called Two Blue Roads. And I think of that bird-like creature there just floating off into the abyss, from whence I do not know. I think you have a couple of other pieces there I could just quickly refer to. This one here. This is the largest painting in the exhibition, and it's called Mapping 2. And it's probably the painting that's taken me the longest to create and feel that I can actually put it out there for people to look at. It's had many, many chapters of interaction between it and me. And I can't begin to tell you what that journey's been like, except that that green rectangular space just to the left of center has held its own from almost the very beginning to the point at which it's now hanging on the wall. And I can't tell you why. I just know that it's a piece that I felt I needed to hang on to, and that seemed to be functioning in the way that it's holding the painting in a place that it might not have otherwise gone. This painting also does really demonstrate my practice pretty well, because there's a lot of very obvious layers here. Stuff getting covered up, stuff being revealed, stuff being hidden up again. And then things like in the top right corner there, masking tape being put on and then painted around and over it, so that when I take the tape off, which I've pre-sized and pre-shaped, it's not just a strip of tape, it'll reveal that which is underneath. And that really points to the things that really fascinate me. The revealing and the hiding. Is it revealing something, or is it hiding something? Do you want me to see it? Do you want me to not quite see it? Do you want me to be wondering whether it's there? These things fascinate me, and the way in which paint can create that kind of dialogue between at least me and the work, hopefully with other people too. So that's how that goes, that piece there. It's called Mapping 2. And it feels to me like a map. You know, I'm sure any of us who've done what I do, which is, I always insist on a window seat in an aeroplane. Gone are the days right now, sitting on aeroplanes, but I always insist on that seat, because I will spend the entire journey, whether it's 2 hours or 40 hours, looking out the window at what goes on with the land or the ocean beneath us. And maybe there's a sensation of that coming through in this piece. That's about it I could say about that one. Oh, this one here, it's about the same time as that one, about a year. This is the beginning of the series that we're looking at here altogether. This one's called Redacted. And to me, I'm looking at it and thinking this is rather a contemporary kind of idea, as we feel, or at least I feel, that we're confronted right now with the questions of what don't we know that we should know? What should we be told that we won't ever be told? How much is secret that if we knew, we'd be in a whole lot better place? And I won't say any more than that, except that it is the kind of thing that during these troubled times with COVID and all sorts of other things going on in the country that disturb me as they disturb so many other people. So this piece is about that whole idea of things being covered up and then possibly revealed or not. So it fits in with my palimpsestic process. I ended up feeling very much like it was a piece of redacted documentation that we weren't quite sure what we were supposed to know. So that's that piece there. And I think you've got the last two images, yeah. So all of that brings you to my very recent work, which you might sense that there's a new thing going on here, which is absolutely true. And this is part of me being, like so many of us, subjected to what the the trials and tribulations of dealing with COVID and the isolation and the questions and the not being able to do what we've always done, I took a workshop from an artist who uses collage, and which I had done very little of, but I took it because I wanted to become immersed in something as opposed to nothing, which was the apathy that we often experience in times like this. And I did some collages, and then subsequent to the workshop, I did these two pieces as the beginning of where my next body of work's going. As it turns out, as I was rummaging for material to do the collage pieces with, there's photographs in these two pieces, and I had not connected it for myself, but the photograph is of a place in Darwin, Australia that I had visited and had in my collection of bits of paper, and they were the pieces I pulled out and used them for these two paintings here, which work as exploration towards larger pieces. The lower one's called Void, and the top one's called Disconnected. And they feel like that's where I feel like I'm isolated and separated out and not quite sure how everything's going to fit together. But it feels appropriate and pertinent to me that I'm moving towards this place where, unlike most of my work, if not all of my work to date, I'm moving into this place where there's lots of open space that's very, very, very pale tones and not clearly colorful like my other work. I mean, most of my other work has lots of imagery going on in layers, but these are not. These are very much about a different experience. And the last slide that Eric has there, this is the same idea, the same thinking, but this is a larger piece. This is a 24-inch piece. But again, it's just looking at vacancy, separation, questioning, how do things fit together? Do they fit together? Will they fit together? Are they supposed to fit together? Do they belong together? And those are all the kinds of things that seem to be driving me and my work as I proceed forward from now. So we'll see where I end up. I have no idea, but that's it. So I think you've looked at all of the slides now, and thank you so much, Eric, for picking out those ones, because they're ones that provide me with some good talking points, I hope.
I'm glad it worked out. Great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time and sharing with us. We do have, so if anybody has questions that they want to submit, you can use the Q&A interface there at the bottom of the screen. And as questions come in, I will just pass those questions on to Janley to get an answer. So feel free, even as she's talking, to type any questions in that you have. We have a couple of questions sitting here. So here we go. Are there any traits that differ between the firing of liquid enamel and the firing of vitreous enamel?
Good question. Not really. I guess the main difference you have to consider, obviously if you're firing anything at 1500, and when I say that, I mean you're putting it into a kiln at 1500. You're not putting something in cold and then waiting for it to get hot. It's straight in at 1500, which tells you, of course, that the enameler is goggled up and gloved up and to the nth degree with all of that. But the nothing can go in the kiln that has any degree of moisture in it at all, because if it did, then everything just spits and lifts off. So with the liquid enamel, that's one of those things you have to be sure of, that it's dry. Of course, the advantage to the liquid enamel is that once you put it on, by whatever means you've done that, spraying it, painting it, and then drawing through it, sgraffitoing it, all of those things, is that it stays where you've put it. With the powdered enamel, of course, it's a question of balancing it and walking across the room with it to the kiln, because the slightest touch will shift everything that you just spent several minutes getting into place. So the firing is essentially the same, providing you've got everything dry. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Separately.
A follow-up question to that, dealing with the firing process. Can you overfire? And if so, what kind of adjustments must be made?
Well, that's the question that points you towards knowing that the whole enamel process requires you to react and accept and respond, because you can easily overfire. If I'm pointing out that a piece of copper, which my pieces are all 12 inches, that's the size of my kiln, I can't go any bigger, I wish I could. It means that the process of it going in there for 90 seconds maximum, if I left it in there longer, then it could easily, the whole thing could fry. Everything could be burned off. And a color that went in and that you've already fused and is beautiful, whatever color it is, whether it's an opaque or a transparent, can and will change with each firing. And so you have to plan the order in which you're going to put them on, if you can plan. For me, I'm very much an intuitive enameler, so I respond to what's already there rather than having a concrete plan. But yeah, you can easily overfire, very easily, which is why I have a rule with my students and myself. If you're at the kiln and your work's in the kiln, you do not talk to anyone and no one talks to you, because you can so easily lose track and it'll be ruined, because 5 seconds can be too much. 5 seconds can be too little as well. So because you're looking for the glass to have melted, but not, and fused, but not burned out. And so what a lot of enamelers will do, myself included, like if you're planning on 20 or so firings, because you've got 20 or so colors or layers, then you're not going to fully fuse all of them until you kind of sense you're at the end of the firing cycle. And then you'll give it a good hot blast at the end and then get everything fixed into place. But it's very intuitive. I don't think you could write a textbook on all of the things you need to know about the characteristics of enameling. There's plenty on how-tos, but it's experience that gets you to know what you want to do in the end.
Yeah, great. It's really good answers, full answers, and I appreciate all the information you're giving us. So another question, or two questions have come in, and they're kind of stacked one on top of the other. So I'll ask them both, and you can answer them as you see fit. So the first question, and I'll just ask that and go right into the second one.
Sure.
How do you go about starting a piece? And then this person is also interested in the difference in creative process for you between making a painting and making an enamel piece.
Ooh. Those are two questions that knit together very nicely. Well, my inspiration, I would have to say, is mainly sourced by landscape. I know it often doesn't look like it if you're looking at pieces of my work, but the way in which I view the landscape and experience the landscape is usually somewhere present within my work. In some way. It might be to do with the way sky hits land, or it might be to do with light and shade, but that's very much quintessential to my practice, is looking at how the land comes together with sky and other elements within it. I've forgotten what the other question was, I'm sorry.
That was an answer to the, how do you start a piece?
That was the answer to the inspiration question, yes. Okay.
And then what's the difference in the creative process for you between making a painting and making an enamel piece?
I apologize for forgetting.
That's fine.
There is very little difference, because I do find that the way in which I approach my creative process is very similar between both painting and enameling. But I would say that what happens when I'm enameling informs the way in which I'll work as a painter and vice versa. So it's, as an example, the way in which with enamel has to be recognized for the way it changes when it comes out of the kiln is a way in which I have learned to give up total control over every single thing I might do with a painting. And so it's allowed me to take risks that I might not otherwise have done. I just go with the flow, if you'll pardon the loose expression, but I'm very much an intuitive painter or enameler. It's what's happened there. Oh, that's happened there. I don't like what's happened there, and I don't like the way that that's made this over here change. So now I need to change that. So it's an awful lot of what I call dialogue between me and the work. That's really the core of my practice, is about that. How that goes back and forth, and creating surface and a kind of juxtaposition of light against dark, or sharp against soft, or dark against bright, you know, any of those contrasts that often make my work, for me, much more interesting for me as a process. Yeah, it's very much the same dialogues are going on with both. And one is informing the other and back again.
Okay, great. Couple more questions are coming in. This is wonderful. Let's see. On the work titled Deliberate, what influenced the different colored paint around the edges of the canvas?
Ah, okay, yes. I've played around with the edge, or the cradle as we call it, of a painting in different ways over the years. When I was doing my MA in England, I came across the work of an artist whose name is going to escape me right this second, but this artist used that cradle edge in a very deliberate way and painted it often bright orange or bright red, and it had nothing to do with the main surface of the painting. What it did, which I loved, was that it made that edge, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, it made the painting glow, because the red or the orange on the cradle reflected usually onto a white gallery wall. And so it kind of made the whole thing glow. And I was just fascinated by this idea. And I played around with it a little bit during my MA experience. And so now occasionally I will do the same thing, which means that I'm thinking about standing slightly to the side and looking, which is what that artist did. Her argument was, her name's Jane something. Oh, I'm so sorry, I can't remember her name. Her argument, which I really identified with, was that if you're in a gallery, this is typical now with our virtual experiences here, if you're in a gallery, you will only see the front and then the sides. If you're looking at the work virtually, in a book or anywhere else, you only ever get to see the front. And she wanted to make something of the three-dimensionality of the painting become more a part of what her work was about. And I found this very fascinating, because I was very much wanting my work to be seen in the flesh rather than virtually. And so so that's why I now still play around with that edge. But I need to point out that I never, ever want that cradle edge to have anything specific to do with the continuum from what's going on the surface of the painting. Those are two very different planes. And for me and my practice, they need to stay that way. There's no relationship other than that one's supporting the other. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, it sounds like a great answer. As an artist, how do you decide which pieces to show at a gallery? And how do you choose the placement of each piece within the gallery?
Okay, I hang a lot of shows, not only my own, but I hang a lot of other people's work too, because I'm part of the group of people who organize the work at Beverly Street School Gallery, and so I'm frequently one of two main people there organizing and arranging other people's work. So that's very interesting. And then, of course, I have another gallery downtown in Stanton, which I also organize, where I will usually find that it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. And I will find that once you've figured out which pieces of work, whether it's my own or someone else's, they kind of feel like they belong to each other or they have a relationship with each other. And then you will move those pieces around until they feel right. And we did this with my show at Bridgewater, and I did that with a friend helping me over on virtually. But it's just like suddenly they feel right. And until you feel, it's a bit like, is the painting finished? It's the same experience. You just know. And for the show at Bridgewater there, I think I brought maybe four more pieces that I didn't feel belonged, but I wanted to have them there in case I needed them. And it was very quick and easy to take them away because they weren't feeling right. And that really speaks to the point I was making right at the beginning about how an exhibition for an artist is as much an experience for the artist to have that kind of personal, private review about where they're up to, as it is for the public to come in and hopefully enjoy what they see. I would also say that very often it feels as though an exhibition can have too much work in it. And maybe I've demonstrated that in that I've created quite a lot of space between my work there at Bridgewater because the space is so beautiful. It feels to me like the space could work with only one painting in it. But I like there to be a breathing space around a piece unless it's designed to be seen with another piece, like my two small collage pieces there. They are relating to each other. But big paintings definitely need a lot of space. But it's nothing for me, at least, about trying to imagine the painting in someone's home, which of course is another facet of the whole business of hanging work on walls in galleries, because it's not like hanging it in a home. It's like a different set of criteria. But if you hang work like in a gallery that's only got like, I don't know, 6 inches between one painting and the next, then it's unlikely that they would ever do that again in anyone's home. So it's about breathing space, allowing things to breathe, have space, like those pieces on your wall behind you.
Yeah, great. Looks like there's a couple more questions here. Following up on conversations about inspiration, throughout the pandemic, have you found it easier to create pieces or more difficult to create new pieces?
More difficult, definitely more difficult. And I have spoken to many artists who've had the same experience. And many of us in part of local communities of artists that we gather virtually to share ideas. There's so many of us that feel like whatever it is that drives us to do the work has been hit in the gut. And it's very difficult to find the initiative or the inspiration to actually put brush to canvas, as it were, pen to paper. I guess that's because painting seems to come from an energy source that's about creativity. Well, obviously it is, because it's all about a creative urge. And it feels as though COVID has, for myself and for many other people I've spoken to, it's kind of removed the urge to be creative, because I think what we're all trying to do is to heal. And we're all trying to answer the question that we can't get an answer to. So I think the way forward with creativity is stymied, it's stuck. And so it's difficult. So people like me are very glad they've had exhibitions to work towards, because that does become the permission. It becomes the reason why work is created, because there's an end goal. But right now, if there isn't an exhibition, what is that end goal? Where are you going to put that work? Who is going to see it? Who is going to share it? So it's very difficult. And I think I've spoken to many, many artists who have the same experience. Then we get to the studio, no, I don't think I'll do that today. You know, let me go do a jigsaw puzzle or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh.
that's great. A question here. I like the notion that an artist learns a lot about her work by having a show and seeing it installed in a gallery. I'm wondering if you might be willing to share some of your reflections on your show at Bridgewater.
Sure. My reflection, well, you know, I need to come and stand in that space again to really do that, because you know, the process of getting the work there and then arranging it and then walking away and leaving Eric to put the nails in the wall to hang it on and then seeing it is fabulous. But I've only been back once since then to make a short video for myself. So I need to come back again now and do that, because the point at which I'm up to with the referencing of that and reflection is that, okay, it all looks like it belongs together. That's surprising, because I've actually got 1, 2, 3, I've got probably 2.5 to 3 bodies of work in that space. And they do feel, I'm happy to think, that they belong to the same artist. I think that that's working. And so that's, you know, whew, thank goodness for that. You know, because when it's all isolated and stuck in the corner of your gallery in your studio because you haven't got space to spread it out, you're never quite sure of that. So I've at least reached that point. The point which I think the questioning is asking is, my gosh, what am I going to do now? Well, I do know that I'm going to do the work that comes from those last pieces we looked at, with the much simpler composition, much paler palette, use of a collage. I know that's where I'm going next. And I would have to say that I pretty much know that I've been heading in that direction for quite some time. But I've been dealing with all these other things, whatever they are, Indigenous Australian influences, or how to get enamel to stick on copper and stay there, or whatever it is. I think I've now reached a place where that's the next question. How to make these, what I hope are strong, simple statements that speak loud enough to be heard, but aren't overwhelmingly pretty or anything of that nature. They're just about strong statement. I mean, this painting behind me here is very complicated, and I'm thinking, gosh, I need to repaint that and get rid of all those bits that are too complicated. It's that kind of thing that goes on, I think. So that's where, I guess that's where I'd have to answer that question right now. But ask me again when I've been and looked at it a couple more times before it comes down, and see what that says then. Yeah. I'm not sure.
Good. That's a great answer. Let's see. How were you introduced to vitreous enamel on copper, and how were your early experiences with it?
Oh, wow. Well, this goes back to 1986. 1986, I had moved across country in England to Bristol, where I had been a student. And when I was living in that city, a very good friend had become an enameler. She was also a ceramics person through history and education, but she had been introduced to enamel. And so she introduced me to enamel. And of course, it's so close to the ceramics experience, giving your work up to the kiln, dealing with heat, dealing with fire, dealing with change, dealing with the way in which things interact with each other. Because ceramics is very much about form. And for me, enameling is about surface. It's about, I'm just using it as a painting material. Anyone else who knows much about enameling will be thinking, well, it's jewelry, isn't it? It's cloisonné, it's your bowls that you've spent 10 years making. It's that kind of thing, which is absolutely exquisite. But I'm using the medium of enamel as I'm just pretending it's a painting. It's a painting that I've fused glass onto metal, not any of those other techniques which are about form. So that's how I got to know it and loved it. And it was instant, absolutely so exciting because of the color, the surface, the transparency, the opacity, the drawing, all of those things come as the package. They're kind of built into the package. It's like, you know, you buy a trip, you know, I don't buy trips, but if you did buy a trip, you know, everything's in it that you need. And there it was. Wow, enameling. All I need now is the kiln, you know, so, and the teaching, of course. It's like so many of the things that we do as practicing artists. And as a teacher since, I don't know, I think I started teaching in the late 60s. You never stop learning, ever. And I think when I'm telling that to new students, they think, well, you've been doing this so long. How could you not? There's so much I still don't know, you know. And any of us who do it and do it thoroughly know that. It's just those who start that don't, you know. So that's kind of how that all fits together for me.
Really good answer. Thank you. It looks like that is all the questions we have. I was going to ask a question of my own, but I feel like it's too pragmatic for the nice poetic ending that you've just given us. So I'll leave it alone.
Oh, you're going to have me curious now to know what that question was.
We'll talk sometime.
Okay.
So thank you again very, very much for joining us this evening. It's been a pleasure to hear you talk about your work, and you've been very generous in your answers and open with us. And it's been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit and hear about your work. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. And thank you to Michael too, in his absence. I hope he's doing wonderful things with his sabbatical. But hello to both of you, and thank you both again. And I'll see you when I come up there next time.
Okay. And thanks again for everybody who's joining us virtually. It's been great to share this time with all of you as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.